He is a familiar name in local writing circles, and he has a new title. Author Vic DiGenti joins us with the story of a Florida man like no other. Welcome, Vic.
Well, thank you, Anne. Great to be here.
Um, you've done a lot of work as a mystery writer, as a ghost writer, and a biographer, but this book seems like a bit of a departure. It's just this really deeply researched history. It's called James R. Anthony, the banker who shaped Florida's history.
That's right. I've worked with about 14 or 15 individuals to write biographies, family histories, etc. But as you said, this one is totally different because it's as much a biography as a Florida history. And it was interesting. Mr. Anthony's granddaughter hired me to write this for her family as a legacy project. And it turned out so well. So many people liked it that I thought it needed a wider audience. So it is now available for sale. But even though Mr. Anthony died in 1940, he had a great impact on our state history. Very few people may have even heard of him. I didn't know him until Miss Anthony introduced him to me.
And tell us, why he's a significant history and kind of how it became clear to you that this was beyond just somebody trying to, recognize their ancestor and had a more significant impact for Florida.
Right. Well, as a biographer and a ghostwriter, I get to work with individuals normally one on one. I interview them and then I go through documents, etc. But I've never had the kind of historical resources that I had with him because Miss Anthony had inherited 5 journals, meticulously documented journals that her grandfather had written that documented his entire family life, his business career, starting in about early 1900s. And he had an impact because he was very successful in retail. He and his brothers had men's clothing stores, including one right next to the Royal Point Sienna Hotel, Flagler's Resort in Palm Beach, that was super successful. He went into real estate, he went into banking. This man rose from a poor Georgia farm boy to what one historian called Florida's king of chain banks. At one time, he controlled 60 banks here in Florida. He went through the land boom of 1924 and 25, made a lot of money, and disentangled himself from the banking business before the crash came in 26. And he had moved to Jacksonville, and he became an officer and shareholder in Peninsula Life Insurance Company. But when he was in the banking business, he was president of the Florida Banking Association. And if you enjoy the fact that Florida has no state income tax, you can thank James Anthony for that because he was able to push that through the legislature as a constitutional amendment when he was president of the Banking
Yeah,
Association.
Florida's no income tax is quite a defining, a characteristic of the state at this point.
Absolutely, absolutely. And along with that, no inheritance tax or estate taxes. And that's all due to his wheelings and dealings, if you will, back then.
So you have done, as we said, ghostwriting projects. You also have done a lot of fiction and mystery writing. You have a series, a trilogy actually, based on a character who's a cat, which is really odd. Most people don't think of that as, the way to get into a
Right,
mystery
right.
story.
Well, I've always considered myself a writer. As you know, I worked here, my old home grounds at WJCT for many years, but I've always written. I wrote on the job, I freelanced, I wrote stories, etc. And I'd always wanted to write novels. So when I retired 20 plus years ago, I started working on a novel. And I had some ideas, but nothing really strong. And the fact that my wife and I had cats over the years, going back 30 years or so, we've had cats. And I had one cat named Duke that used to plop itself on my keyboard. And so I said, well, I might as well write about cats. So I came up with this idea of a cat culture going back thousands of years. And so the Windrusher books that you mentioned are kind of mystery adventures with a lot of mystical threads that go through them. And I only wrote one thinking that would be it, but it sold very well and got a lot of attention. So I wrote 2 more in the series before going on to writing mystery thrillers.
And you mentioned your work at WJCT. I mean, some people will remember that you were the executive producer of the Jacksonville Jazz Festival for a number of years. Um, what are your fondest memories of that period, the Jazz Festival productions?
Well, I have a lot of memories. The first memory isn't too fond because I took over in, I want to say, 93. And we were doing the festival, as you know, here in Metropolitan Park in October at the time. And one of the nor'easters moved in during that weekend, unfortunately. So, but we have other great memories, and it was a terrific time being here.
Yeah, well, Vic DiGenti, it's nice to have you back here. Thanks so much for coming on and telling us about your new book about James R. Anthony, the banker who shaped Florida's history.
And it is on sale now at Amazon and local bookstores.